This is a quick video, an updated video on my Cisco Firewall end of life device migration tool. And for those that have not yet seen this tool, let me just quickly summarize what it is and explain really how you can use it. And the second part is really going to be more for those that have been using the tool from the very start, but I've noticed now that certain things have changed and more features have been added. So the Cisco Firewall end of life device migration tool is basically a simple tool that can be used to really identify Cisco end of life firewalls. So devices that have been, or firewalls that have been announced end of life, or end of life is up and coming for those devices. And the idea is that it will allow you to really look at what the next best appropriate Cisco firewall is, so that you can start to plan to move towards one of the newer Cisco firewalls. So we have a couple of options. So we've got option one, which is basically a simple click and select from the drop down menu of end of life or devices that have been announced end of life, and that will allow you to basically select your device, and then it will present you with a number of options for newer devices. We then have option two, which is the ability to compare multiple Cisco firewalls. So I have introduced this option because some people wanted to compare more than one firewall that was maybe identified and suggested in option one. So this option will allow you to select an end of life firewall, and then it will allow you to select two new firewalls, optionally the second one, and then compare up to up to two new firewalls with the old end of life device. And then lastly, we have option three, which is the ability to filter based on key metrics for these firewalls. So we've got a number of metrics that we can filter on. So we've got, if ASA stateful inspection throughput is more important to yourself, then you can filter on that. Whereas if you're running FTD code, we can filter based on throughput with firewall and application visibility and control features enabled. Or we can say, you know what, we want to look for a firewall with at least 8 interfaces, so we can do that, and so on and so forth. Hopefully you get the idea there. And then once you apply that filter, again, the results of all the firewalls that are capable of doing that will be presented. So the reason I'm doing this updated video is, one, to just sort of reintroduce this tool to those that may have not seen it, and also to give an update to those that have been using it. So I've had an overwhelming response from people within Cisco and also external that have been using this tool to figure out what devices could be the most appropriate to move to for their end-of-life devices. Now, I've decided to keep the disclaimer there because it's always worth just double checking the information on Cisco data sheets for the firewalls before placing an order. Don't just, things change. So don't just sort of take all the information here as face value, although I have done a lot of work to make this tool as accurate as possible. But it's always worth going to the data sheets just to check more information as well, and maybe look at other metrics that may not be covered in this migration tool. So that's the first part. And then the second part is really just to introduce some of the new features that I've added. Now, the sort of visual aspect has slightly changed from when I first did this tool. Nothing too much apart from just making sure that it's a lot more clear in the way that the options are defined. And now I've introduced the ability to export the results that you get, so that you can share them or come back to them at a later time. So we've got export buttons under each option, and I've decided to include an export to Excel for the option 3. And the reason I've done that rather than PDF is basically because you tend to get a lot more output depending on what you enter in this section here. So Excel was the best way to go for this option. So just to quickly run through each option and show you how everything functions, especially for those that have not maybe been using this tool yet. We'll start with option 1. So this is, option 1 is to find a recommended alternative Cisco firewall. Now, option 1 really works by what I've done here is the suggested device or devices for an end-of-life device is basically based on a device that is a nearer spec to your current end-of-life device, or all metrics are actually better than the closest to, but better than the metrics of the end-of-life device. So if we just select the drop down and we choose ASA 5506, for example, we can see now that we're going to get the output. So we've got all the metrics here in this column in the rows, and then we've got the end-of-life device with their key metrics there, and then we've got the recommended or alternative device here. And you can see that the recommended device here is the Secure Firewall 1010, and it gives you basically a comparison of the metrics against the end-of-life device, and then it also shows you in the last column basically the differences. And this is really just to show you whether the metrics are improved, whether they're the same, or whether in fact the alternative device is actually underperforming in some areas compared to your current end-of-life device. Now, metrics, maybe not every single one is important to every customer. They may have one or two that are particularly important. So it's always worth looking through these just to make sure that you are trying to find the best device moving forward for your environment. And also making sure that you consider, potential growth in the business and longevity in terms of, how long are you going to be using these new firewalls? Is it going to be 5+ years? You really want to plan for that growth, because the last thing you want is to maybe select a device that is under spec or the same even, but then within the next 5 years you're going to experience some crazy growth. And I always take the example of, say, COVID, for example, where let's just see if we could select let's say 5516, and we've got 2 recommended alternatives here, and we can see, for example, here the 5516 actually has the capability to have up to 300 VPN peers, whereas the recommended alternative, which is the 1120, for example, can only do up to 150 unless you get the other recommended alternative, which is the 1140. Now, as I said, some of the recommendations are based on as close of a match to the current metrics of the end-of-life device. So some metrics may be slightly negative, some metrics may be equal to or greater than. And then we also have a second option, which is where every single metric, as you can see in the last column here, is actually better or the same as the end-of-life device. So back to the point of COVID, the reason why I brought that up is because when we're thinking about speccing for a new device, we might think in this case, let's say for instance, we can see that the 1120, for example, is actually a good improvement when we're looking at sort of FTD throughput and also firewall throughput when using the ASA, which is great. And you may not really care about sort of the VPN peers because you're not really using it for that many users. So you may think, well, okay, let's opt to get the 1120. which is all well and good. But then in situations where, COVID happened, we saw a lot of customers scrambling to enable access to resources on-prem from a remote location for their employees. But then a lot of them were suddenly finding out that A, they either didn't have a license for that, and or B, that their current device just couldn't cope with the number of connections or VPN peers, let's say, that it might have needed, for example. And it's not just that, there's other metrics as well that may have increased the load, etc., which might have made their current device unsuitable. So I say all that to say that when we sort of, the idea of this is to sort of give you a nice view of what the potential newer devices could be for you, and also just keep in mind that of the business, the business trends, where the business is going. Are they sort of looking to upscale or downscale and things like that? Just making sure that you plan for the future. So that's a sort of long-winded, demo of option one. But let's say now we wanted to export this to a PDF so that we could come back to it later or show our colleagues or customers. We could just simply press export results. And you can see now that it's just going to export those results for me now. It's already sort of cleared that selection. And then once those results are exported, we can just open the file. Just give it a moment here. And there you go. So it will just basically present you the table that you was presented on the web app as well. So you can use it for future use. Great. So we've done that. And that's option one. So quickly, if we just run through option two, again, if we wanted to say select a 5508, let's say, for example, and we want really, so if we say in option one where we selected that and we could see, well, we've got two differences here, but maybe you're a bit unsure about both of them and you wanted to really have the option to select the potential new devices yourself. Well, what we could do here is we can come to option two and compare multiple firewalls. So we could say, well, in fact, maybe I want to compare it with a 1210, and maybe I want to compare it with a 1010, for example. And what you're going to see here is, again, it's going to give you the output of your basically selected options, and it's going to provide you with the differences. So you can see a device 2 versus device 1 and device 3 versus device 1 and differences there. And again, if you want to save that, you can export those results to PDF. So lastly, we've got then the the option where you can actually filter based on metrics that really matter to you. So let's say, for instance, we were really concerned about VPN peers, and we wanted, say, a minimum of 50. Let's just apply that there. What it's going to do is it's going to return every single new or newer Cisco firewall that is capable of having 50 VPN peers or more. So you can see it's going to return every single one. And obviously you can filter based on, more metrics if you want. But let's say that's enough and you wanted that. We could just simply save this. So export results to Excel. Give it a moment here. And then once we're happy with that, we can then just open our file. And there you go. You're going to get all the results based on the metrics that you entered there. You can actually use this to do some further investigation or simply decide which firewall you really want to go with Cisco. And that's pretty much a guided tour through the Cisco Firewall end-of-life device migration tool. I will continue to develop it as people are using it. If there is features and things that you would like to see in this tool, please do let me know. Please reach out to me on my website, or if you're internal to Cisco, reach out to me and let me know. But I hope that you find this useful, and I hope that it serves a good purpose for finding your new Cisco firewall.